Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, hello.
So you're that way. So, but I can actually see you there, but I have a monitor on the other side. So I'm going to pretend I'm going to be looking at you. So, yeah, they're that way. Look that way. It's confusing. It's terribly confusing. So, with us today, we're having my very good friend and colleague, Dustin Valkema.
Hi,
And we're going to talk about, you can say hi, Dustin. You can say hi. Don't be shy.
hi.
Most of you, if not all, know Dustin already. And I want to thank you again for your generosity in sharing your invaluable knowledge and experience for all the users. And as far as I understand it, today we are going to talk about AOVs and maybe some compositing and stuff like that, and see if we can answer some questions. I can see we already have questions. That's fantastic. Um, so, do you agree with that thread, Dustin?
Do I agree with what?
AOVs and stuff like that. Do
Yeah,
you
sure.
agree?
Sorry, I'm reading the comments. I'm
Yeah,
prepping
yeah,
up for that.
that's what happens. We're two people here. I have two sets of comments here, and all that. So let's quickly start with the housekeeping, the necessary stuff we have over here. So I'm going to share my screen for a second, and very quickly, if you want to see what events are going on online, including today's, you can see it here. Go to the Maxon events page and check out what's going on, upcoming videos, and don't forget we're starting on Monday with the very exciting mechanical rigging in Cinema 4D. We're going to have a lot of stuff. You can read the descriptions here and learn what it's all about. Go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, where after these videos have played live, this is the YouTube channel that hosts the recordings, including all the timestamps and stuff like that, which are very kindly provided by Dr. Sassy. And you can also go to the Maxon YouTube channel and check out thousands of tutorials, hundreds presentations and stuff like that. Don't forget, if you want to learn ZBrush, this absolutely amazing artist-friendly software for digital sculpting and more, go to the YouTube website of Pixelogic ZBrush. And if you want to become a certified pro user or a certified trainer, go to the certification page and go to here, click on the certification links, which is going to open this page, and twirl them down, and you can read a list of things which we consider to be the most important ones for you to know enough about Cinema 4D, where you can pretty much either learn anything you want and expand your knowledge, or do most of the stuff that you have in your mind, right? It's all about the artist's mind and putting your ideas on a screen or on a piece of paper or a wall, right? What's the most extravagant place you've put your art on, Dustin?
Oh, geez. I've done a couple vehicle wraps in the
Oh,
day, so I've had like large cargo vans and stuff,
mhm.
but nothing cool. Nothing like it's up there. Times Square, any of that. Not yet.
When I used to be, all right, I'm going to tell you a story when we're done with this. So today's and it's the last day of November today. Yeah, happy December tomorrow. In some places on the planet, it's already December the 1st. Go and claim your free T-shirt for the month of November using Maxon Simulation. I hope I didn't type it wrong. So Maxon Simulation, and this is going to be somewhat in the comments as well. You only pay for postage and packaging, and the T-shirt is free. So get a nice T-shirt, and of course, don't forget to go to Cineversity and watch the amazing tutorials. Which one is this? Motion capture workflows. Yes, these are the 4 weeks I did with Joe Herman. And again, don't underestimate the Cineversity.com, the old Cineversity, which has thousands, tens of thousands of tutorials about pretty much everything you ever wish to learn. So let me remove my page from there. So here's a story. Besides buses and all that, when I was in advertising, I did a lot of still advertising and bus stops, buses, and all that, buildings sometimes. But the most I would say the one I was most proud of was a job I did for a car manufacturer through an agency that was 120,000 pixels long. It was a carbon fiber sculpted image that was on a 18-meter wall at the Paris car show somewhere in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, something like that. I don't remember dates. My previous life is a blur. But yeah, that was my biggest thing. And it wasn't very easy to do, although the concept was very easy because the rendering was a bit, there was no way to render all that in one pass. I had to render it in a few passes and then stitch it up in Photoshop or something like that. But yeah, that's my highlight in terms of the biggest and most prestigious of places where some of my work was put there. I didn't come up with the idea, by the way. So let's talk a bit about AOVs. I'm going to do a small introduction. I know that a lot of you know exactly what AOVs are, and I'm going to show you some tricks that I've used in the past when I have questions about, oh, what does this do? What does this not do? And so forth. And then Dustin is probably going to show us something pretty, because that's not what I do. So this is my Cinema 4D empty document. And first of all, AOV stands for arbitrary output variables. In English, that means multipass, right? That's as simple as it gets. And you can find these, either you go to the Redshift menu, and somewhere around here, you would find the AOV Manager, which is over here, Redshift AOV Manager. This is the manager. You can also find it if you go to your render settings in the advanced Redshift settings and go to the AOV. You can open up this manager here, right? It's the same thing. And the purpose of the AOV is for you to be able to get a separate render, separate file for one of these rendering effects. The beauty pass, custom AOVs, which the custom AOVs allow you to take any node that has some color information or something like that and get it in during rendering as a separate image, image inclusion, backgrounds, and so forth. And by what this allows you to do essentially is create a composition where you can change some colors for objects or some of your effects in post. Instead of re-rendering again, you can do the change in your favorite compositing program using these AOVs, because you can export masks and so forth. And as far as which ones do what, there's an extensive overview in the documentation. If you go to the Cinema 4D Online documentation, help and show help and all that. But what I like to do, because it allowed me to learn a bit more, was just add everything. Just go, when you create a scene and you have some time to go and investigate, you just add everything. Now, let me see if I can find very quickly on the side over here. I think I have my own scene. I have, and sorry for not seeing our faces now. Yeah, I got a bit confused with what I had to do today, and I didn't bring everything up to, there you go, to be available. I have this file over here. I'm going to put the complexity test, this one over here. Okay. And give it a few seconds to load. Yep, it's quite old. And this is a scene I made a long time ago. And, well, it's the most complex one I made myself. And it's just a little journey through a city made of various components. And let's assume that I wanted to do some sort of AOV work. I'm not, I don't want to think too much. I just want to do things more instinctively. I'm going to bring up the AOV Manager. I'm going to go here, select all, and drag them all in here, right? Just because. And it looks fancy as well. If anyone asks you, well, what are you doing? Oh, I'm checking out the AOVs. So there's a bit of a fancy component to this, and just put it down here. And one thing that confused me in the beginning was that I couldn't get any of my AOVs to work. That's because for some of them, you need to have buckets on. So make sure you have your bucket rendering on before you start looking at AOVs, and you'll find them in here. So every single AOV you added to the manager, you click on this and you will see this list is now full of your AOVs. And you can just start scrolling through these and see if anything comes up. Well, I haven't used a ambient occlusion in my scene because I have no AO nodes. So I'm getting absolutely nothing. And what else? Do I have caustics? No, I don't have caustics. Do I have cryptomattes? No. What a diffuse filter, right? This will give you the raw colors of the materials you've used in your diffuse channel without any light application. So if you go to your material here, I need to find, I think it's is it the dark? I'm not very sure which one. City Hall, there you go. There you go. It's the main material. And if we go here, you will see that these are this color. And this is pretty much what you get without the influence of light. And by having a much more simpler scene with known values, you can go down the list and see what each and every one of your AOVs gives you. And this is a good way to start learning AOVs. It's not very obvious what's going on here, but you can see from the colorization that there is some change of color. It's just not visible in the stream. I can see it in my scene. Here is the other one, the raw color without the reflections, without all these things. This is what you would use to as an AOV before you composite over the top the reflections and all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, because we have a lot of these, going through the documentation and at the same time experimenting, because if you've made a scene, most times when you create your scene, you're approaching it in a creative way. You're not creating it with the with a final scope to use AOVs, right? You will add your necessary AOVs at the end. So it's good to know which ones work for you. It will take you merely a few minutes to go through the list and see, oh, am I getting something? I do have some fog. There you go. I forgot I had some fog. Let's see. We need the environment. And yes, I do have some fog. And here you can see the fog. Now, what's interesting about the AOVs is that sometimes you can use them in non-standard ways. In this particular case, you can have your own fog and use it as a depth map. I do have depth of field and motion blur here. They're all on. But that doesn't mean that you can't create it in post. And of course, you can use a Z depth. Somewhere down here is the Z, the depth. Actually, it's in the D, A, B, C, D, depth. But in certain situations, you can actually use fog to simulate it, or gradients or stuff like that. So you get a good idea of what's available to you. And for example, the last one here, I'm glad that at least they're all alphabetical down here. And let me bring this up, undock, so we can see it better. They're all alphabetical down here. Are they? Oh no, they were added in a different in a different order. I did not know that. But you can go down here and see alphabetically what's available, and now of course they've been removed from your rendering. But anyhow, this was just a very long way to say that just drag them all in, start checking them out to see which ones have data, which of that data can be used in various different ways, and that will expand your ability to do more things when you are compositing. So the other piece of advice I have is if you want to isolate objects, there are many methods to do that. You can use the IDs directly. You can use what's called Cryptomatte, which requires the plugin in After Effects. Whereas Cryptomatte itself, and let's go and add a Cryptomatte here. It's interesting, Cryptomatte. Oh, there you go. It was that window. So let me get rid of that. The Cryptomatte just randomizes the colors of objects based on the parameters you've set here, the object name or something like that. So if you have a particular naming convention for your objects, you can change it to the material name, for example. So you're going to get the same color for objects that have the same name. Or you're going to say get the same color for objects that have the same material name applied to them, or the same object ID, or some sort of user attribute you can use. And depending on how you want to separate your objects, because the objective of a Cryptomatte is you have these very unique colors. This green color here, for example, when you take it into After Effects, you click on it and it creates an alpha channel for that particular color alone. And that is the magic of Cryptomatte. You don't have to set many things up other than having proper naming or material naming and so forth. And then you can extract alpha channels for each and every one of the elements that have this particular color. So if I make an alpha channel of this green, it will give me this, it will give me this, it will give me these little, are they the same? I don't know. This one and so forth. So it's quite useful. Now there's an alternative way.
Can I interject a minute?
Yeah, please. Always.
So one of the biggest things that I realized, if you're looking to do Photoshop compositing specifically, is that when you're working in 32-bit mode in Photoshop, you have a lot of tools. And we talked about this in the Demystifying series a while back. We'll look at a couple of those renders today if we have time. But if you're working in 32-bit mode in Photoshop, you have a lot of tools that you can't use, say like the magic wand tool to select various colors in your Cryptomatte. And so it's often easier to check out some of the workflows that I use there. We can discuss it a little bit today to get a base composite done in Photoshop and then kind of work your way into 16-bit mode as fast as possible so that you have access to a lot more tools. So especially when you're using things like a depth of field, you start to get those fuzzy edges on a lot of your mats. So the way that I like to do this is, say, on specifically more like product renders and things that I really need to have like access to these mats for sure. I like to use puzzle mats for that because I can control exactly what values in that alpha channel are set up.
Yep,
exactly
that's what I was going to show.
So,
that's what I was going to show right after that. So keep
nice.
going.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Show it.
I have a question for you first. So.
Sure.
Because I don't do final artwork, right? Most of my media is just the 1080p videos with either my face or just my computer screen. So I don't care. I have heard that unless you're doing very you're compressing colors a lot and you're doing heavy compositing, trying to extract the last little bit of information, in most cases, 16-bit and 32-bit have no difference in terms of a human's ability to see those differences. And is that correct? Does 16-bit have enough information for most of the stuff you can do?
It does. It does actually. It has plenty of information. If you're working in photography, as I do as a photographer, I'm glad I can't shoot in 32-bit because it would make no sense, and I would probably just do it so that I can have the almighty control over the pixels. But we really don't need to do it that often. Working in Redshift specifically. The reason why I like to render a lot of things out in 32-bit mode is because it can be a bit tricky to work in a 16-bit fashion when you're exporting, various layers, and it assigns like a linear color space and so on. So it's a little bit different than other, render engines and so on that I've used in the past to get similar results. So with, every software, with every different, render engine and way to work, you kind of develop different workflows. So my workflow in, Cinema 4D and Redshift is a little bit different than my workflow in Octane. And when I was working in Corona years ago, it was a little bit different yet. So it just kind of changes up a little bit as you start to adjust. But yes, there is really not a huge difference between 16 and 32-bit, depending on, whatever output you're going for. Most of the time you can get away. What's that?
I would assume that if you're creating your own high dynamic range images that you're going to use for lighting and stuff, then that it's a single frame You may want it at high resolution to get nice crisp reflections or something like that. So the higher bit depth you can achieve, the better it is. But at the end of the day, if you're going to do hardcore compositing, again, you need every little bit of data. For example, a depth pass, because each unit of light is a unit of depth as well. I don't know, like centimeters, and you want as much granularity so you don't get any stepping. Again, for certain of your AOVs working in 32-bit, and of course you can choose each AOV what bit depth it can have. As far as I understand it, over here you can go to each and every one of your AOVs that say, let's get the diffuse lighting, okay? Diffuse lighting, and you can say diffuse lighting, I want it in 16 bits, and the Cryptomatte, I want it in 32 bits because I have a lot of Cryptomattes and I have a lot of different colors and so forth. So you have the ability to do that. I want to add a bit of tangential thing here, that in terms of exporting, what appears to be the case is that EXR, which is an industry standard now, actually offers a very good compression. I was told, so I don't know if that is absolutely correct. So let's go and check Cinema 4D settings. But what I was told is that if you're saving, because you can save your AOVs both through Cinema 4D's multipass, in case you didn't know, and directly from Redshift's exporter over here. This is these are the export algorithms that Redshift creates. These are the direct ones. And multipass, it goes through Cinema 4Ds. And you would assume that they are identical, and I don't disagree with that. But you can even have both for whatever reason. If you want to compare, whenever you're in doubt about something, just try both ways and see what works better for you. So what I was saying here is that a lot of people have the habit of saving 16-bit PNGs because it sounds 16-bit and it's got compression and all that. But what I was told was that using an EXR, now, if anyone knows better than me, please post it. But this is what I was told, that when you're using EXR, use the actual depth of 32-bit color information, but this is stored as 16-bit floats. I have no idea what that means, I have to tell you. But I was told that if you add to this the DWAB compression, which is not really visible by the human eye, again, I was told, so I'm not going to say who said it, but you can blame the unnamed person that told me, that this has the best combination of information for most cases with a file. This particular compression, I was told that in many cases gives you a smaller file than the PNG. Now, I don't know what your experience is. I haven't tried it. I don't care. But this is sort of the information I was told, and I'm putting it forth. And it will be good if people from our audience sort of try that and see if it works for them. But the compromise, because compression always adds something. But if that something is not, remove some information. But if that information is, so to speak, redundant, and you need your disk space and all that, because when you're rendering animations at 4K or something like that, it does cost a lot of space to have these things. But anyhow,
see, now I'm curious because I have never messed around with that. So
that's your homework.
Yeah, there's some good homework. Everybody else, go ahead and test this theory out and see if it works.
And try this. Yes. I know this is about AOV, so let me say a few more things which are not very obvious. What is called $file path in the direct output, this file path here, represents this here. This, whatever path you put in here, is what's represented by this token $file path. $file name is the file name, and then $pass is the number, the name of the pass, which you can name it here as well. It will take the default name, or you can go name it here, I don't know, Noseman or Dustin or something like that. So yeah, and it will give you the other thing that I hadn't seen up until a few months ago, because I don't know what's wrong with me. I do these things very early in the morning when caffeine hasn't hit in. Right here, you see a sample. That's why you can't edit this. This is just for you to see what the this is generating. So if I go to my render settings and say Noseman is very smart, and click here, Redshift complexity, where's Noseman is very smart? Well, that's not a path, is it? So I'm going to put a slash in front of it and see if that works. Oops, Noseman, and then a slash, and then 1, 2, 3. Do that. Noseman. Okay, I should have written it properly without any spaces. I forgot I'm working on Windows. But in any case, this is a preview of where your file is going to be saved. So you have direct feedback of where it's going anyway. And you can try the same thing here. Again, RGB or something like that, OpenEXR, half float. And where is compression, DWAB? So this would be the similar. Now, I don't know what the difference is, and I'm admitting ignorance here. Here it says depth 32-bit with stored as 16-bit floats. And here it says half float 16 bits. Oh, but the bits per channel are 32. Now I got it. All right. I just learned something. It's amazing. We do a live show and I learn things. So this bits per channel represents the depth and has to do with the information that's being recorded. And this is how that's written in the information. And again, I admit that I have no idea what this means exactly, but try that experiment and maybe you save some disk space, which is always a good thing to do. Shall I show the puzzle mats, right? Because
sure, we can show the puzzle mats, and then we can talk about, this is actually kind of cool just seeing it on your screen as we're doing this, and we can sort of discuss a little bit of it. So let's talk about puzzle mats, and then we can move on and briefly talk about the bump pass, or so the bump normals. We can talk about those because there's a little bit of a gotcha with those in most cases if you're used to working in other packages. So yeah.
I suggest you have a scene to show that.
I can show it.
Good. I'm gonna hand you the screen.
I can definitely show it. You have a very well put together scene to discuss it. So we can, yeah.
I'm just no. Everyone's just lucky that I happen to have a scene I made years ago. This is the outcome of serendipitous effect. So puzzle mats. Here's the puzzle mat. Now you can at some of these passes, you cannot add a second one because what it's recording is very absolute. So as far as I know, you cannot add 2 diffuse lighting passes. Right? It doesn't even exist here because I dragged it in here. But right. The puzzle mat, you can add as many as you want. So you will find out how many of these, and the way to find that out is that after you add everything, whatever is left can be added more times. All right. So remember that that's basically the gist of all this. So let me select all these and remove them from here, and they'll go back to where they belong. And let's get the puzzle mat. I always lose it. Puzzle mat. Okay. Now, the puzzle mat, first of all, and this is my personal opinion because I don't know. The mode is material ID. Right? That's the main mode for it. And I always prefer the object ID. But let's begin with this. Where is the material ID? It's not on the object. It's on the material. So let's go to one of my materials here. Let's get the screens, right? I have these glowing screens, and maybe I want to put some videos on them. I don't know. I want to do something, change their color and all that. So I'm going to double click on the screen here, and I'm going to show you, you can see it in front of you, material ID, but I'm going to show you my journey of discovering that. So I would select this, and I was trying to find basic, preview, incandescent. I couldn't find a material ID. That's because it's in the output. So I had to say that because I was terribly confused. I thought about looking everywhere else. I was looking for a material ID node and all that. The output is what defines, what compiles everything you put through into a renderable component, into a material. When everything is here, the surface, displacement, volume, environment, and lights, and all that are complete. And over here in the inputs, you have the material ID. So let's set this to any number. I'm going to put the number at 121. It needs to be an integer number. I'm going to copy it because once I go away, I'm going to forget what number I typed here. So if I do forget, please remind me. Dustin. So 121, that is this materials ID, which is applied, or if I go to the assignment over here, you can see it's applied to quite a few billboards, right? Just in case you didn't know, you can select your materials, go here and see which objects. You can even select them. If you go right click, you can select that particular object in the manager and it will appear here if you have anything on. So that, remember that it was ID 121. So my question now is, where, put the puzzle mat on, make sure you have your buckets. How do I inform my puzzle mat that I want that particular ID to appear over here? Well, the puzzle mat has 3 components: the red, the green, and the blue. If I put the number 121, which is the material ID of that particular set of objects, we're going to get those in our red channel. That is what's happening now. We're going to get them in the red channel. So now I can use what's it called in After Effects? Matte extractor. Is that matte extractor? There's a matte something. There's in After Effects a included effect.
Yeah, I feel like it's the extractor. I could be wrong.
No, the extractor is for EXRs. There's one matte, matte. Right. If anyone knows it, put it in there. Yeah, because I forget the word. And you can extract the black and white of this RGB image and use the red component in its pure form, black to white, as a mask. So we have, let's see. I'm just getting compliments. Thank you very much. I thought it was a question. So, and we're going to get to questions if there are any in a while. And just don't forget, preface your question with a capitalized question so we can distinguish it from compliments. We get overwhelmed with those things. Now let's find another material. Let's get the little LEDs I've made there and double click and go to the output and set this to, I don't know, I'm going to set this to 2, a simple number, which I'm not going to forget. So you can go to the puzzle mat itself and say, okay, I want the whatever has an ID of 2 to appear in the green channel. So now we're going to see a composition in this RGB image where greens are going to be all the objects that have the material with an ID of 2. And you can put the same ID on more than one object. It's not mandatory that only one material has one ID. I can change my green here to have 2 as well. So they're all going to appear now on the green. And 121, nothing has 121, so it's not going to do anything. You can even say, I want the 2s to be on all 3 of my channels. So everything is going to be white now because it combines red, green, and blue. So the puzzle mat, and this is for 3 components, right? You can add here 2, 121, 42, whatever. You can create another puzzle mat that has another set of material IDs. Then you can add another one that has object IDs because you want separate passes for your objects and so forth. But the way it works is consistent. That's it. It just assigns all the objects that have that material with that ID on each and every one of the channels, or all the channels, or whatever you want to do. Now, Cryptomatte is not that much different. You can still use the material IDs or the material names or the object IDs in Cryptomatte. The only difference there is that it's set up for you automatically, and you need a certain plugin to extract that information immediately as a mask. Because here, it's defined as red, green, and blue. And extracting the red, green, and blue as a black and white mask is very easy. You just take that channel by itself and you eliminate the other 2. Whereas with Cryptomatte, it uses weird colors, which are unique. So if I add this here and object name, you will see that there are differences in the color. I'm pressing Control. Is it Control? Yeah, I'm pressing Control when I'm hovering over here to get those numbers. And you can see that this color is consistent. You can see from RGBA values and the other values, this is a different color. What the Cryptomatte plugin does, it takes all the pixels that have this absolute combination of colors and makes a mask automatically out of them. So depending on your workflow, if you have a lot of objects, or if you have access to a compositing software that has the ability to extract, Cryptomattes. Cryptomatte may be a solution for you, but if you want to be a bit more controlled and say, you know something, I just want my lights. That's all I want. I don't want to have too many things to deal with. Then this is how you work. And that is the Puzzle Matte. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass the baton to Dustin. Are you decent? Can I bring your screen up?
Sure. Yeah, let's bring it up.
There we go.
All right, there we go. So continuing on very quickly about the Cryptomattes and how to get those, we'll just say into Photoshop. You can use Cryptomatte plugins and whatnot for After Effects. You can bring them into Nuke or Fusion, whatever you're doing there. Exr-IO is what I like to use as far as the Photoshop plugin that I use to get my passes and everything into that space. So currently, I believe this is still just for Windows and not Mac ready. But this is hands down the best plugin that I've ever used that allows you to import Cryptomattes and get all of the different, layers and whatnot, masks out of those. So check this out, exr-io.com, exr-io.com. It's pretty good. So let's briefly talk about the bump normals. So when you throw bump normals into a scene, a lot of times you're not going to see the blue channel. So we have the red and the green. So green being the y-axis, that's going to give you your top-down information. If you check out the demystifying series that I did on this, you'll see a couple different ways to use those passes or use that information from the Y normal specifically to create some nice light rolls. When I was doing automotive compositing, this is something that we used quite often on vehicles because we could create a really nice kind of like bright to dark shadow fall off from the top to the bottom of the vehicles. And so that's the green channel. Red channel is going to be left and right. So that's pretty self-explanatory. In Photoshop, you can just flip that back and forth. But the blue channel is going to be your, we'll say, front to back information, kind of like a depth pass. But you're not going to get that immediately. So let me start my render view. I had to turn it off every time I'm on a stream. Thanasis, I don't know if you deal with this with your insane, battle station that you have over there at your place, but it starts to chug a little bit, and you'll see me start to like glitch and kind of get crazy over here. And so,
do you really want to hear? Do you want to know what graphics card I have? I'm flexing.
I don't. Maybe, I guess. Sure, I do.
Okay, wait for this. You've never heard of this. It's an RTX 5000. So it's a 2080 with 16 gigs of RAM. That's it. But I have to say, so this it's a small tower workstation that Dell provided to me. But man, the quality of these machines is absolutely amazing. Because I'm a Mac person, I hate PCs. But in terms of quality and stability and all that, I've had no problem. So I don't know why. Maybe it's the RAM or something like that. I'm extremely happy. And it's not, it's a 3-year-old equivalent GPU, something like that. The RTX 5000s are, I think, 3 years old. Yeah, it's so good, I don't want to get rid of it. I'm not even asking for a new one. I could. But that's how happy I am with the stability. And for me, stability beats everything else. I cannot pop-up menus and blue screens and all that kind of stuff. I'd rather be a carpenter, honestly. So yeah, this is for me a sanity saver.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm on two 2080 Ti's, and so that's nice, but it does get a little bit slow when I'm streaming. So yeah, it's good. I've got friends that are on on much older cards that crush it as well. So it doesn't always matter. It just depends on how patient you are based on what you're doing. So the blue channel that we have here is non-existent. And so when I first started using Redshift, it kind of threw me off, and I'm like, the funny part about this is that in most cases, I don't actually use that blue channel too often. A lot of times, if you've seen how I use the hue shifting in Photoshop to kind of adjust and tweak and like relight certain parts of my scene, that's where the blue channel really comes into play. But being a control junkie in that sense, I like to have quite a bit. You know, I'd rather have the information and not need it than need it and not have it. So I like to make sure it's there. So the way that I've gotten around this for projects that I'm pretty sure I'll need this on is I just rotate my scene. So I'm going to delete the protection tag here a moment. You'll want to make sure that's done if you have cameras in here with protection tags on them. So I'll grab my entire scene and I'll head to the top view and then just rotate this. If I can do that with my, there we go. And I'll just rotate this 180 degrees, holding down shift. There we go. And so now we get that blue channel information. And so you're just switching from the, I guess, sort of front facing to back facing side of the scene. So you're essentially just inverting it as to what was the front versus the back. So we're in the negative Z right now, which is giving us that information. So it works out pretty well, but this is definitely one of those things that kind of threw me for a loop. So if you didn't know, now you know. And that's one thing that I do quite often.
That is because, as far as I understand, normals that are represented in world space, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Do we have any questions? I knew that there were some questions here in the beginning. We may have to go all the way up in the comment thread here, because I know those were right at the beginning. We started off with a couple of them.
Yeah, there are some questions. Let's take it from the top and see if I'm not going to. So I'm going to go. When I do 16-bit compositing in Photoshop, I lose colored data in diffuse lighting, raw, and GI raw, which are always 32. How can I solve that? Is that something you're aware of?
I was trying to ponder this one while we were talking earlier. I generally don't use the raw data, the raw data passes like that. So I use diffuse lighting. I don't use diffuse lighting raw, because I do feel that I've always felt that you lose some. Let's pull those into this scene. So we can diffuse lighting raw.
And the other one is filter, right?
And I believe, and yeah, we can do filter as well. We're in diffuse filter. There we go. And so we can check all of these out. So diffuse filter, diffuse lighting, this is what I'm used to. And lighting raw. So that's interesting though, but I'm very curious as to maybe the output side of that once you get to Photoshop when you're in 32-bit. The reason why I generally have gone for the diffuse lighting is I like to see that as it is in the render view side. So when I'm rebuilding my various projects, like rebuilding a beauty pass, this is kind of all talked about in the compositing demystifying series as well. I don't know if we can even get a link to that. I'm sure you can search the Maxon Training Team for compositing, or I think it's called Make Your Renders Pop was the name of that series. So you can find it with a quick search.
Or you can watch all the videos until you find.
You just watch them all the way down. But so I generally like to work with the diffuse lighting so that I just have the information as I see it here. And with rendering out like a 32-bit, EXR, it's going to give me plenty of information to raise shadows, drop exposure, whatever type of kind of, quick rebalancing that I want to do. So that I don't have to worry about so much of that on the post side. More specifically, when I'm working in Photoshop, if I'm doing something like film compositing, it's, it can be a little bit different, but if it just really boils down to what you need out of those passes. And so I like to work with the diffuse lighting just because it gives me what I need, accurate shadows and lighting just based on the scene as I see it. And I don't really have to go and rebuild and kind of recomposite the image that I already had once I get to post. So
what is your impression on Photoshop's ability to work with high dynamic range images? Because I don't use it in that context. I use it mainly for some textures and stuff like that, or drawing doodles. Is the experience of using high dynamic ranges 16 or 32-bit in Photoshop on par with After Effects? And I think there was a relevant question about this. How do you feel about it, about working in these colors?
So at 16-bit, I like Photoshop's ability to work in 16-bit because you have the full, tool set. I mean, there are certain filters and whatnot that don't really work too great at 16-bit and may require you to go, to 8-bit, but that's a little bit, many of those are kind of legacy effects and filters and so on. So, as far as tools are concerned, you have like the full span of tools at 16-bit in Photoshop. I absolutely love the workflows there. For 32-bit, that's where it gets a little bit different, in my opinion on it, because you lose a lot of the functionality of certain tools, of certain commands, levels, curves. I mean, those are available now, but for quite a while early on, they weren't. And so you kind of have like one of your arms tied when you're working in 32-bit mode in Photoshop, as far as I'm concerned. And so what I like to do is once I get into compositing in Photoshop for 32-bit images, I like to balance out. So, say that I have my highlights are a little bit blown out. I like to add my ACES transform, different things to make it look the way that it did in Redshift, and then adjust there. But I move to 16-bit as fast as possible when I'm working on comps there. And so, when you have an output in multipass, it also comes in a linear color space. And so you have to keep that in mind, that when you're working and doing all of these things, you're going to have to adjust that color space at some point. And so that's why, that process for me is getting things into Photoshop at 32-bit, making the slight adjustments that I need to, and then copying my all of my ID passes in a folder, and then I merge everything down to 16-bit, and then I just repaste those, mats and layers in. Right. So all of that stuff is in that course, in that series for the demystifying. We can talk about it briefly, and so we'll just say here, this is what we would look like. So this is currently in 16-bit. These are just the project files from that series. So when you pull everything in, it's all going to come into Photoshop as a linear dodge. So you'll just select all of your layers, and we'll head to normal. And so once we get here, if we take a look, basically what I'm generally going to do is literally select any of my information passes. So the shadows, my IDs, Cryptomattes, things like that. I'm going to throw those into a group and call those ACC. That's just for me. I know they're accessory passes that I can use if I need them. And I'm going to copy this. And we can sort of simulate this being an EXR. But what it will do is when you adjust under image here, so using an EXR, you'll head to mode. It's going to be in 32-bit. When you change the 16-bit, you'll have a dialog that pops up and asks you how you want to do this. If you want to merge the scene, which you always want to merge the scene to preserve the appearance, you'll go to gamma and exposure, the little setting there. It's going to make everything look the way that it was, but it's going to flatten your image. And so with that, once I already have this accessory layer set up, we can just grab all of these and merge. So imagine you just started off, your EXR is now 16-bit. You can paste these layers back in, and you're going to have access to all of those. Now, what you're not going to have is all of that base composite. So the beauty layers of, you know, the specular, which you can include those if you want to copy those back out and use them. But most of the time I'm just doing all of my basic composite tweaks and stuff to that EXR just to make it look, you know, good at a starting point to start building in different effects and layers and so on. So just know that once you go from, you know, 32-bit to 16-bit, you're going to have access to all the tools, and that's the way that I personally like to work. So yeah, that's how that is there. As far as losing color, I would have to go and check this out in a little bit more detail and kind of do some renders that I know we won't have time for today. But I'm thinking that, you know, it may just be with the passes that you're using, and, you know, that you're starting to lose some data once you get that render out, or you're going to have to rebuild, you know, when you're working with something raw versus working with something that's already, you know, got what we'll just consider like the effects or the transforms, kind of like the baked in information. You're always going to have to do some tweaking and adjustments to get that to look right. It's kind of like using your tone mapped versus untone mapped in Redshift. You know, it's just boils down to the information that you want to use and how you need to use it. So for me, it's almost always just using the beauty diffuse lighting.
Yeah, if it's any consolation to anyone, I've been using Photoshop since 1992, and I still have no idea how to set the color management in Photoshop. So, you know, there's room for progress here. Let's go down a few more questions here because there are a couple of interesting ones. So Brian asks, thanks for training. You're very welcome. Thanks for being here and all those pleasantries. And it says, how do you access the AOV for an item's reflection of another surface so you can composite onto another surface and add the original reflection? So that's an interesting one, if I understand the question properly. Do you mind if I take the screen, Dustin?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just gonna look into the mats. So yeah, go ahead and take it. You got it already. There you go.
Very quickly, right? Let's test something. Now, I'm going to create a plane, which I'm going to use to catch some reflections here. And I'm going to get a sphere, make it small. I'm just going to build this scene up here and see what comes out, right? And for the floor, I'm going to create a 100% reflective material. Now, what I'm going to sort of demonstrate is that there could be a method which I'm unaware of, but sometimes getting all the information you want exactly as you want it directly is not always possible. So let's go quickly here, and we can use one of the two methods, either make it this full metalness, or the method I like because it sounds more fancy, of putting an IOR of, let's say, 20. The correct one is the metalness, but this is my little revolution against the correctness in general. So let's bring up my Redshift and turn this on, and we should see the reflection. Now, let's go to this and let's give it a rendering tag. Let's do that. Let's go object ID. Or we can do a puzzle matte. I'm going to use object ID of 1. You need an ID more than larger than 0. Okay. And let's go to our AOV Manager here and see what happens. And I'm sort of winging this to see what's going to happen. So let's get a puzzle matte. Where's my puzzle matte? And again, let's do that and close this, get the puzzle matte, and put 1 and 1 and 1. And let's go and bring up the puzzle matte and my buckets. So you can see that by definition, by default, this object does not. Oh, what did I do? What did I do? Material ID. It gets me every single time. I just said it. I just told people what to do, and it still gets me. Right? That's why I said it. I think it was me projecting. So because the reflection, I know it's not going to come, and then I thought, but where's the object? So okay, if you turn on refract IDs, you will get the component of the reflection of that object, and this is the essence of this switch here. That it will test the reflection and refraction rays for a tag of ID 1. Now you can see that it's slightly a darker color, and that's because of the angle of incidence over here, and because the IOR, as high as you'll put it, it won't become 100% reflective. So it's always losing a component to preserve the energy of the system. Okay, so now you essentially have the reflection of this object, and you would ask me, yeah, can I actually do that without having this? In this particular case, it's not. It wouldn't be very hard to do with one object. But if you're doing something a bit more specific, this will be something you will have to fix in post. For example, you can make another puzzle mat. Let's get another puzzle mat here. Where I always lose my puzzle mat. P P P P P. There it is. And I'm getting this puzzle mat here, which is going to be, again, I nearly forgot about that as well. And this puzzle mat here, the second puzzle mat, only has this object. Well, if you go to this puzzle mat and you use the other puzzle mat invert it and multiply it in your compositing software, you're just left with this. So you can't do it directly, but in certain circumstances, you will use this one that has both your material ID and the reflection of the material ID. And then you're going to create another one that only has the the object ID of this. When I said material ID before, I meant object ID. See, my brain is overcompensating now. And you can composite these against each other and get it. Or you can just create a garbage mat manually and remove it from before you use this as an alpha channel. So this would be one way to do this. Do you have any comments on this?
No, that's, generally speaking, that's exactly like a garbage mat is how I would, excuse me, is how I would handle it.
Yes.
Because it can be tricky, and it really depends on the scene. Like if you're say creating a product render, then what I would use is just I would just use like a shadow mat for that.
Mhm.
And go that route, because you can introduce reflections into that.
Yep.
And that's the way that I would go there. If you're talking more kind of scene based, like we're talking here, it can be really tricky, and it's gonna get quite complicated, in your settings and in your AOVs. So the easiest way is probably just to use the mat settings inside of that Redshift object tag.
And I think another thing to consider is that there's a bit more work to do when you're doing animations, of course, rather than when you're doing still images. Because with still images, you can extract something, it's a still image. But if your camera is moving around and this changes position, you have to make your garbage mat move. And what happens if you get to an angle of view where the object and the shadow now are pretty much overlapping, as we will see very soon. Very soon. There you go. That was soon enough. So in these particular cases, you will have to use something like an extra mat. You take this, you feather it ever so slightly, because with transitions, and this is something everyone needs to be aware that with various overlapping objects and some things that include refracting objects and reflections and so forth, you need to be to make sure you avoid halos, and sometimes that can become tricky depending on what kind of AOV compositing you're doing. So let's continue down the questions. We always have one question about AI, right? And I'm not going to reply. Maybe we can do a show. I would love to have one of those Greek style news shows where in Greece you will see 20 windows, 20 people on the screen, all talking at the same time, and actually not talking, everyone shouting over each other at the same time. And that's a standard thing, right? I do not want anyone to pass judgment for how my peoples do this. Well, that's what we need to do. We need to fill the screen a grid of everyone that has an opinion, and we can talk about AI. I think
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, they should ban it. Everyone that is involved to be imprisoned. That's my general opinion. So okay, let's go and see another question. Dances for Peas, how are you? How much of this C4D to PS Photoshop translate to C4D and After Effects for video compositing? I love what you did here. So the thing is, After Effects, when it comes to these things, appears to be a bit more capable. But I'd like to hear Dustin's opinion on that, because Photoshop is your tool of choice.
Yeah, so Photoshop is my tool of choice. After that, I worked as a Nuke compositor for quite a long time, about 5 years or so, both on stills at larger studios doing automotive compositing and whatnot, and then also working on bits of film and video, commercials and so on. My entire base was in Photoshop. So when it's tough, like how much of it really translates. The fundamentals of compositing translates across any software that you're using. You kind of hear us talk about it a lot, is learning, how to master the fundamentals. And that has to do with understanding, like in this case with compositing, it's, understanding what your output or your desired output is, first of all. And then, starting to build those foundations and knowing how to get those results. So working with different layers, knowing, when to use puzzle mats versus Cryptomattes. And that really just boils down to experience and what works best for you for the projects that you're working on. How to use the normals pass, the AO shadow passes, things like that. If you learn how to do that in stills in Photoshop, it's going to translate pretty well into After Effects. And in Nuke and in Fusion, whatever you're using, it's all really going to translate, just as a whole, because the fundamental thought process and workflow on how to use them or what to do with them is all the same. Yes. Now, how you specifically do that in After Effects versus Nuke versus Fusion versus Photoshop, it's all going to be a little bit different. But that learning curve, at least in my experience, of having worked in Photoshop for years and then, getting into Nuke and then having to do some work, in After Effects, here and there, it's like once you understand what you're trying to do, it's a lot easier to figure out, the more technical, like how to do this thing.
That's the most important thing, right? To understand how these pixel-based, because both After Effects and Nuke and all, they're all pixel-based, right? That's what they do. They use pixels as visible components or as data channels. That's it. And in terms of data channels, think of black and white as maximum and minimum of whatever you want to do, right? You want to blur something more here and less there. Well, you make something that's white is more, and gray, which is less, and you say apply this blur based on that alpha channel, because that's what an alpha channel is. It's basically a way to record a value, how much of something will happen, and then you can use that something with any tool you want. Let's continue down another question here about can we use two mats have the same object ID and so forth. But yes, if I understood the question correctly, let me do this. Is this the one? Is this the one? I think this is good enough. So let's continue with this scene here. And I'm going to show you some combinations you can do. It's not a huge problem. And let's go to the beauty. Oh, why did I close that? I wanted it. Yep. And let's remove these for now. We're going to add them again. And we're going to create, I'm going to create 4 objects, right? These two have an ID of 1, right? So ID of 1, ID of 1. I'm going to take these two and make these an ID of 2. So select these and make them ID of 2. At the same time, I'm going to make 2 materials. One is going to be 1. And in the material, I'm going to set this to a material ID of 1. And I'm going to apply this not to the same numbers, but the first of 2 and the first of 1. I'm going to make a second material called 2. And I'm going to apply it with a material ID of 2 to the other ones, 2 and 2, right? And because this is getting extremely confusing, I'm going to make one green. I'm going to make the other one red. There you go. So we should see these 4 over here. I can close this now. And I'm going to add a puzzle mat again. Let's add a puzzle mat, and we're going to add 2 puzzle mats. Do this. Can never have more space. I just want more space. I want a 1,000 million pixel monitor. So I'm going to be puzzle mat and puzzle mat. So we have these 2 puzzle mats. So one is going to be material ID 1 and 2, and the other one is going to be object ID 1 and 2. All right. And what we're going to see here is this one is going to give us green, green, red, red, and this one is going to give us red, red, green, green. So you can do this, and you can also, as you can see, just using these different methods, apply this. And you can have another puzzle mat that you can have a puzzle mat that has, can have the same object. It doesn't matter, right? I can have this in the blue with my material ID. Here it is. So I have the same 2 objects in a blue channel and so forth. So as far as mixing and matching and going forth, as long as each puzzle mat is reading, it can't read both the object ID and the material ID, but you can create different puzzle mats and apply it. And I hope this sort of answers your question. All right. So let's go a bit further down. Jake, howdy. Yes, I like that comment. He has a Dell and it's been amazing. Exactly my point. Someone is flexing. Yeah. Ross Garden. Yeah, thank you. I hope you get a blue screen of death right now. Bad juju. Let's do some bad juju, right? So yeah, I'm just jealous, right? I'm just jealous. No bad intents, right? No bad intents. I'm just I'm jealous for very good reason. So let's see. Why do you use Photoshop for compositing instead of Nuke or After Effects? That is for Dustin. And Dustin, why do you use Photoshop instead of the other programs? I pretty much know the answer, but you can tell us as well.
Yeah, so it really just boils down to what I do the most. So I'm a photographer, and I composite. I do photo composites, and so I composite my photograph subjects into CG backgrounds and so on. So I generally don't have much of a need to use anything other than Photoshop, because Photoshop just gives me literally all of the tools that I need to extract subjects fairly quickly. In my workflows, I actually work with a gray screen instead of a green or a blue. So I'm not having to worry about chroma and keying and any of that stuff, on the photo side. So, for me, it's easier just to use Photoshop, the tools that I have there to extract my subjects, and then I throw those into Cinema 4D and Redshift and build environments around my subjects. So, Photoshop, it's very fast if you're working image based, and I don't have to worry about all of the extra stuff. I just kind of throw things in. If I need to brush here and there and remove parts of an image, it's not a big deal. I don't have to use, say, like roto tools and different stuff to paint and brush and all of these things out. So that's why I use Photoshop when I'm working on stills. Now, if I'm not working on stills, that's generally going to be, After Effects, Nuke, Fusion, something in that side. But for me, with what I'm doing 99% of the time, Photoshop works just fine for that. So it really boils down to what you're working on and what tool is the best to work on said project. And for me, that's usually Photoshop.
I have to tell everyone on our stream, please go and watch. Which was the one where you showed how you composed the photograph and you used that gray background and all that? That was absolutely amazing. Where you did the photography and you set the lights. Which one was? I think.
Which one was that? Was that Christmas? Was that the Christmas one?
Remember. Go watch everywhere you see Dustin's face. Just go watch them. It's a treasure trove of information and inspiration and all that, because Dustin is predominantly an artist. He's a photographer, right? And he does an excellent job at it, by the way. Okay, let's continue. Compliments, I hate those. This is an interesting one, and we're going to take turns for this, right? Can you, Dustin, to begin with, list the AOVs you would typically use in a render? Very nice question. Great question.
Go watch my videos.
Go watch the video.
So, off the top of my head, it's diffuse lighting, I like the specular lighting, reflections, refractions if I'm using something like glass, subsurface if I'm using something that has subsurface scattering, involved. I like to use the main pass instead of the beauty pass in a lot of cases. In my current workflows for various types of projects, I actually render out a PNG beauty. So I use like the still image and the multi-pass image, there. And so I just pull my, regular image, if you will, directly into my comp, and I'll use that if I'm just doing beauty compositing. So diffuse lighting, specular, reflections, refractions. I like the shadow pass, bump normals, puzzle mats, and Cryptomatte if I need to set them up depending on what the project is. And man, what else? AO is one of those that I don't always use, but I like to have it there. Most of the times, if I'm working on, say, a commercial project, I like to have an AO pass. I have ways to fake and get details that are kind of AO based, enhancing like the cracks, crevices of models and so on, just in Photoshop. But yeah, those are generally the passes that I use. For kind of rebuilding. I shouldn't even say rebuilding. If I'm rebuilding, there's a whole formula in the documentation to rebuild the beauty, your beauty pass, if you will. I don't have a need for that too often. So like my day to day is the diffuse lighting because I like to have the ability to layer that over a beauty image and then kind of work with the opacity. And that's going to mattify, if you will, like that object a bit and kind of remove a little bit of the reflections there. The specular and reflection passes allow me to enhance the reflections or the, specular. They're kind of very similar, but they're read differently in 3D and render layers. And so the bump normals pass is something that I'm using all the time because that contains the bump information from the shaders that you have on your objects. But that's what I use to relight quite often. So I like to go in and enhance rim lights or key lights and so on. So that's kind of my list of passes that I like to use. And if you're looking at wanting to understand how to rebuild that beauty pass or that beauty image, go check out the videos for demystifying. I think it was May of this year. Like I have a whole like 4 or 5 week segment that's talking about specifically all of this stuff. So yeah.
My favorite is the specular pass. Now, I do want to make a little distinction with the specular pass, so there are no confusions here, because specular passes and reflection passes can be confused. So here's my scene. Here I've got 2 very reflective objects. Okay, very reflective. I can add some metalness to make them a bit more reflective, and no roughness or anything like that. And I've added a reflections and a specular pass. And then I'm going to talk about the filter. So the specular pass, specular lighting, only gives you the reflective component of a physical light object, whether it's an area light, whether it's a dome light, anything that is considered a light and that does not consider luminant objects. If the objects are luminant, they do not show in the specular, only physical lights, the stuff you'll find in this menu here. The reflections reflect the component that is actually reflective. So what you're seeing, this looks a bit odd, and that is because these are shiny spheres with a very small component, a 0 component of color, very, very small one. And because the majority of the sphere's color comes from the reflection, when the light strikes this, and strikes back to reflect over this, it's a reflection ray. So you're just seeing here from the other spheres. If you go here, you will see that this one reflects into here. That's a little thing. This one reflects into there. I can go closer. That one is that one over there. And I always forget what button. There you go, to navigate. So you can see how these reflections, these little teeny weeny little things, this is not a reflection of light. This is a reflection of this sphere that has a reflection of the light, a specular of the light, right? So if I tell this to show me the reflections, only the components that are reflecting. And there's a general concept that when a ray bounces off something, it becomes from a direct diffuse ray, it becomes a reflective ray, because the information it carries is the reflection information. The diffuse, let's say, when the light hits this, the diffuse information is stuck on the object, because if there's no reflection, it sticks there. But the reflection bounces off. Again, that's not technically accurate, but it's a way to think about it. Now, talking about reflections, now the reflections filter, and whatever the filter is, it's just because, I've been asked this question a few times, and maybe not everyone knows what it is. So it shows this white thing, right? What is that white? Well, here's what it is. It's extremely simple. Let me drag this here. What is the weight of the reflection? This value here. This is the color you're going to get. The filter pertains to the weight of whatever effect we're measuring. So for material 1, if I set my reflection to 0.5, we should get a reflection filter of 50%. That's all it does. So if you use a noise to drive your weight for this, then what you're going to get here is the position of that noise on this object that creates that. And this allows you to control in your compositing how much something else is going to reflect on this to be consistent with the amount of reflection it's receiving currently. So that's what the filter does, and I think that's important. Now, the reason I like the specular lighting and the reflection lighting is because you can do really interesting bloom and glare and effects using these, because the reflections, the specular lighting filter is only going to give you the reflection of the lights, and that's usually where the most intense amount of light exists. And let's measure this, right? So here we have a value of 1, 1, 1, and 1. Okay, and let me see. Does it have a clamp in the reflections? There is no clamp. Let me see what happens if I take the area light and make the increase the exposure. I don't even know what's going to happen, but I'm under the impression. Oh, it didn't. Did it change? Look at the value on the left, not the normalized value on the right. Look at the middle value, 933.
That is insane.
Whereas if I make this default 0, that is just 4. So the great thing about working in high dynamic ranges for these data channels especially, and this is where I would suggest you work in 32-bit, is that you can use that then with various bloom and effects and all that, providing you're using 32-bit high dynamic range colors in After Effects, so that you can create really interesting blooms and glares and so forth. But it does become deceiving sometimes when you just see this white blotch here and you think it's okay, black and white. What can I do with this? No. It records the value, right? Again, let me show you 4.8. And let's go here and make this 10. That's an exponent of 10. And now it's rendering 4,292, right? So that value is actually read inside your compositing program. So you can do amazing stuff. And this is my go-to. Because I don't care to make nice things, I put a lot of glares on whatever I do. I mean, that's how you're supposed to do it. So let's, we only have a few minutes, so let's go quickly down the questions and see what else we have here. Joshua, hey, great stuff, thank you. And I'm going to leave the compliments out. I apologize if I miss one of your compliments. And let's see. No answers on GPTs. Sandro, how you doing, brother? Sandro says, Dustin, you're a cool man. I'm here. What about me? Right. So, yeah, a Nuke cost. I read Nuke costs a dang fortune, and I read Duke. Yeah. Just don't judge me. All right. This is funny. Question. So following this logic, Moonlight is not a reflection. It's a specular. Yes. But is the sun a light source or an illuminant surface? Ha! Gotcha. So yeah, we'll have to ponder on that, right? That's more philosophical, a philosophical question. That is good. Yeah, I think did I miss any questions? Object Matte, how we can have an alpha shadow. Oh, okay, wait, we have one here about Redshift Object Matte. How can I have the alpha shadow in a different layer? So the model in an alpha and the shadow in alpha in a separate layer. I'm not sure. What I'd like, right, let me suggest something here. What I'd like you to do is make a very simple scene with like a sphere and a floor, put your light, nice little light, and tell me, I want to get a pass with this, and I'm going to pass with this. And DM me, and my my Twitter is at NosemanGR. Send me that very simplified scene file, nothing else inside, so I can take a look. And this is a general thing I tell everyone. My DMs are open. So if you do have any questions, please make sure that you simplify your scenes. No third-party plugins, no texturing if that's not part of the problem, and limit the amount of objects and everything to the minimum number of objects and settings and all that start exhibiting the problem. Sometimes I get these production scenes that have all sorts of third-party renderers or third-party stuff in there, and I can't, I don't know them. I open them, I try to simplify them, but at the end, I don't know what's going on. One thing I can guarantee, and tell me, Dustin, if that's the case, is that in the process of simplifying a scene, sometimes, most of the times, the problem reveals itself. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's so much a problem that that's trying to be solved. Rather, it's how can I have an alpha shadow in a different layer so the model in alpha and the shadow on a separate layer? So the way that you would do that is the way that I would do this is doing this in post. So you would have an alpha set for your subject or for your object that that you want to have matted out, and then you have a separate object ID set up to the ground, so that with your shadow pass you can just instantly, I shouldn't say instantly, but within a few clicks, you can have that ground shadow completely separate from the rest of your scene file. I'm looking here to see if I have
I've just created a scene. Let's see here what what it does. Right. I thought, why not just try and make it right. So let's get the plane. Let me, we're in beauty. Let's turn this off for a second so I can do this quickly. Let's get the light a bit further up and scale it down. Good. Turn on the beauty. So we can see now. Oh yeah, that's my my pretty intense light. There we go. So we have a scene here that has shadows, and I've activated the shadow pass. Now we know that we can get the objects, right? The reflections or the puzzle mats and all that. What does shadows gives us? So the shadows gives us an inverted image of the shadow. So the amount of shadow, which let's say is 100%, is white, and the amount of non-shadow is black. Now, by the way, I personally disagree with this. It's technically correct, but I'd rather have the shadows as black, and you can just throw them and multiply them on it. But you can always do that. You can invert it and multiply it. Anyhow, so here are your shadows, okay? This is an alpha, essentially. So this is what the shadow pass creates. It creates an alpha of your shadows. I think what the user is asking for is the underlying object, the floor, to be in its color without the shadows. I think that's the objective here. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if the diffuse allows you to omit shadows. It doesn't. So diffuse lighting, there's nothing that says don't give me shadows. This is a good test case for takes. This is something that you would do with takes. So you would make, in the same scene, you would make one take with your shadows on, so you can capture that AOV, and then you would go and make another take where the light is casting no shadows at all. Let's see here. There you go. You're going to have another take that gives you this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's definitely, yeah, you're spot on with that, and how you would use takes.
Yeah, you would use takes because, you know, the take manager was designed to do things like this as well, because there are certain types of combinations of requirements when it comes to multipasses, AOVs, and all that, where it's not very easy for the renderer to do it, because shadows are an intricate part of your render at the end of the day. All right, it's not only one, and especially with you know, pure ray tracing like Redshift, sometimes it's difficult, so you have to go and do it manually. For example, let me give you the following example. How would you exclude? So what you will see here, I'm going to set it to brute force because that thing it does in GI, the irradiance cache just irritates me. Now, look at this sphere here. These two blotches here are the shadows of these two here. So if I turn off the shadows, these two blotches are going to disappear. So the shadow itself is not just a shadow. It participates in the image overall. So these are the little challenges you're going to have. So that's why in these particular cases, you can use these with these shadows in your as your main render. Get your shadows using the shadow pass alpha, and then use your take to render the floor alone without the shadows and the light off. And then if you replace these 4 spheres with the other spheres, the ones that have the little shadows, and then multiply the inverse of your shadows on top of that, basically you have that. And
yeah, I would be very curious to know the use case, you know, having a little bit more clarification on exactly what that's for.
I
Because
can tell you because shadows is one of those things where I would really love to have them without the objects being visible. This is it's I find it very interesting sometimes. How can you get shadows only? Because if I want to shift the shadows in compositing, all of them, and now I'm
right.
going to get a halo, right? I'm going to get a gap here.
Yep.
So in that particular case, sometimes, and I had that with product packaging, where I would have a last minute correction. Can you move the shadow a bit? And that required me to actually do pure shadow passes. And I think just if I'm not mistaken, you can go to the Redshift object in matte. You can turn on the matte and enable shadow here. So this object is a shadow catcher
You can
object.
just throw a dome light in there so that you can get the white background. It should show it pretty well.
Yep. Yes, you're right. So
Because I literally I just had the same type of deal set up. So
and
yeah,
let's put its light contribution to 0, so it only gives us a background, so that we only have the lighting. That's how you would make this only work as a background. You just turn the contribution of everything. And what you're seeing here, just to make sure that the users understand, we're seeing the background behind the shadow. The shadow now is opacity. over here, right? So you can use in another take, you get this object and you activate the shadow pass, and you can use them in that context as to multiply them. The other thing you could do is exclude these from reflections and only cast shadows. Anyway, there are different combinations you can do with this kind of setup, and the take system is ideal to do things like that. And in this particular case, this is what I'm going to show, and then we're going to, I'm removing that tag, and then we're going to close the show because we've overrun by over half an hour. The way you would set this up is that the button you need to turn on and off to create those two passes is the cast shadow button. Okay, so you go in the takes. This is your normal take. You're going to add a new take. And depending on how you want to work with this, you're going to turn this on and you're going to modify this in that take. So it will inherit all the parameters from the main and only change this particular little button. And now if you render both of these takes, this take is going to render this. This take is going to render this. And with your shadow map and those two renders, you can pretty much do what you are planning to do, or whatever else you want to add, get the shadows to render without viewing these objects and so forth. But it's not all that complex to do in the first place. Okay. Anything else you need to add, my friend?
No, the biggest thing is check out the demystifying series. Check that out on Photoshop compositing, making your renders path. We cover a lot of the AOVs specifically, not as much exactly how to set them up in Redshift, but how to use them in Photoshop, which will also translate quite well if you're using After Effects, Nuke, Fusion. Like I said, the principles there are all the same. Yeah, and so we did just, I believe my latest Cineversity tutorial or series is live now, so you can check that out on the new Cineversity, I believe. I don't think it's on the old one, but on the new Cineversity.
So nothing new in the old one. Everything is in the.
It is all to the new one. Awesome. So yeah, you can check that out. It's all about the just photographic lighting techniques and how I think of 3D from a photography background and vice versa, because I learned 3D first. And so kind of talks a bit about how, that transition happened and just kind of mixing those principles together. So yeah, last thing is cghacks.com. We have our Black Friday sale that ends tomorrow. So go check it out. 3D textures, all the good stuff that we have there. And yeah, it's pretty sweet. So I think that's all that we have for today, man. That's good. We only went over a half hour. It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
CGHacks.com.
Yep, cghacks.com.
I just put it in the comments. And what I'm showing here is if you go to the News University and you search for Dustin, and this is what you get. And yeah, just make sure you watch everything.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that pulls up everything.
Oh, yeah, and we did, remember what we did here?
Wow. I remember all of this stuff now.
Oh, my. Yeah, but anyway, there's too much content. As I tell everyone, retire early and spend the rest of your lives watching tutorials from the Maxon Training Team. That's it. It's you can cancel all your TV subscriptions, get a Maxon One subscription so you can play around with that, and just watch these videos, right? That's the best life advice I can give anyone at this moment. Okay, well,
retire early, and then you can get all the crow's feet, wrinkles, and all of that, and dive deep into creation. So.
I will not repeat the housekeeping. I want to thank you again, Dustin, for another great hangout. I want to thank especially all the people that are watching us. Please don't forget, share, like, subscribe, whatever YouTube creators say, and yeah, inform your colleagues. Tell people that we can answer questions live. It's fun to be with us. You can pretend you're being educated on work. If anyone asks you, what are you watching there? If your manager asks you that, oh, I'm getting high quality, free, that's the word, the magic word, free high quality education by some of the most knowledgeable trainers, master trainers, and all that. We're both master trainers, by the way, right? So we're no joke here. We're not fooling around. We're providing master trainer quality education, and that's what you need to tell your manager. So again, it was a pleasure seeing you, my friend. Hang in there in the green room. I'll be with you in a second. Again, thank you very much, everyone. And in 3 seconds, we are off. 3, 2,
bye, everyone.
1, bye.